All right, so it looks like we're heading for a pretty entertaining showdown next month between Senator Raphael Warnock and his current Republican opponent who is trying to take that seat from him, Herschel Walker. And I got an absolutely wild clip here for you guys of Herschel Walker speaking about how he thinks that debate is potentially going to go. So let's go ahead and jump into this clip here, and then I will give you guys my thoughts on it.
So I'm preparing. I'm this country boy. I'm not that smart. And he's that preacher. He's a smart man, wear these nice suits. So he's going to show up and embarrass me at the debate October the 14th. And I'm just waiting. I'll show up, and I'm going to do my best. So I'm preparing.
Okay, so there's a number of different things to say about that. I mean, obviously, number one, yeah, he's not that smart of a guy. It is what it is. I don't think that he's qualified to be running as a senator, not just because he's like not intelligent enough or whatever the fuck, but because he has no discernible policy stances on virtually anything. And this guy can't even string together a coherent sentence. Meanwhile, he has a massively troubling past, which we're going to get into here in a second. But I mean, yeah, I think that when he debates Raphael Warnock, he is going to embarrass him. So I mean, this is a little bit of a admission here that he understands that he is not the better candidate in this current campaign that he's running. But at the same time, I think that this could be something that works a little bit to his favor in some sense. And I think that Walker Bragman made a good point about that down here below. He said, "Do not underestimate this tactic. People will identify with him against the educated liberal elites who don't care about their struggles." And he says, "Mockery will only harden their support. Focus on how Mr. I'm just a country boy supports an agenda that will further disempower those voters." So I think he's 100% correct. I do think that, somebody like Herschel Walker, who has a very deep history here in the state of Georgia, a very favorable history. He was the running back for the Georgia Bulldogs. And so he has a lot of street cred, basically, with a lot of conservatives in this country. And so I think that could work to his advantage, as well as, kind of having this persona where he's not somebody who's like super well-spoken. He's not somebody who is, could be portrayed as like one of these out-of-touch educated liberal elites or whatever. So, I think that there is a good balance there between criticizing him for him being just kind of a dumb fuck in some ways. I mean, let's be honest, he's admitting it himself. And there needs to be a balance between like pointing that out versus actually just getting into what this guy actually believes in and what kind of an agenda that he would be pushing if he was elected to be the senator of Georgia. And so just to give you a little bit of a reminder in terms of, what this guy has said about various policy issues. Again, it's pretty incoherent, so it's kind of hard to actually piece together exactly what his policy stances are, but you can get a general feel from it from stories like this. So here from CNN, they say, Herschel Walker knocks new healthcare and climate law. I think this is talking about the Inflation Reduction Act. He said, "Don't we have enough trees around here?" Okay, so interesting take. Let's get a little bit more information. They say Herschel Walker, the Republican Senate nominee in Georgia, criticized the spending provisions in the newly passed healthcare and climate law, including money allocated for an urban forestry program, which he dismissed as unnecessary. And he said, "A lot of money, it's going to trees. Don't we have enough trees around here?" Walker said at a Republican Jewish Committee event near Atlanta, according to the AJC. So he said, "Yes, you heard me right," Walker tweeted. "Joe Biden and Reverend Warnock are spending $1.5 billion on urban forestry," which, first of all, that's not even that much money. We're talking about $1.5 billion over the next 10 years. So really, you're talking about like $150 million a year from a federal level going into protecting, urban forestry. I mean, like that is a tiny amount of money. It's not like they're just dumping money into this bloated program or something like they do with the Pentagon. I mean, this is a tiny fraction of even what's in this bill. But he says, "You're also raising taxes on those making under $200,000 to pay for it. Yes, I have a problem with that." So this portion of it, that's just straight up misinformation. They're not raising taxes on anybody who's making less than $400,000 as a part of that plan. A lot of it was quote unquote paid for, even though that's not how federal funding works. But that's a whole nother discussion about like modern monetary theory and shit like that. But the way that they quote unquote pay for this is with raising taxes on the wealthiest billion-dollar corporations in the country, where they set that like 15% corporate minimum tax rate, okay, which is, by the way, less than what they are already supposed to be paying under the current standard, which is 21%. So it didn't even have a tax increase in this plan. You're literally just talking about a tiny increase in the taxes that corporations are actually effectively going to be paying, which is still below the amount that they're actually supposed to be paying according to the fucking law. So, I mean, it was, a tiny fraction of what was actually needed in terms of overhauling our tax system here in the United States, as well as, dramatically underfunding a lot of these climate initiatives and basically taking a market capitalist approach to trying to address climate change. So if anything, it wasn't enough. And even on the specifics of forestry and trees, as he apparently despises, I guess. But even just on the specifics here within the state of Georgia, I haven't really had a chance to do a deep dive and cover this story. But basically, the city of Atlanta is deciding to spend $90 million on a training facility for law enforcement and firefighters, and it has residents losing faith that city officials are taking them seriously. So $90 million while they are going to be raising an Atlanta forest, a historic forest here in this city. They're going to be tearing down a lot of these trees and clearing an area to go spend almost $100 million on a completely unnecessary cop city where they were going to be like training cops and doing these bullshit training procedures in their cars and shooting ranges and all of these different destructive things, as well as building housing for the cops on site. I mean, it's just a completely absurd and unnecessary project that they are doing, and in the meantime destroying forestry here in the state of Georgia. So even just on the specifics of that here in this state, I think that he's wrong about the lack of a need for some funding to protect urban forestry. If anything, we need more than what was allocated in that program that he was talking about. Now, to get a little bit more detailed here in terms of the arguments that conservatives are making surrounding how this IRA, this Inflation Reduction Act, is going to be paid for, right? There are some Republicans who are trying to make weaselly arguments around how this is going to tangentially or indirectly raise taxes on lower income Americans or anybody below that $200,000 threshold. So here's the argument that they're laying out here. They say Republican lawmakers have seized on a Joint Committee on Taxation report that shows that the measures will indirectly hit lower income and middle class Americans. Economists expect that employers will pass along a portion of the corporate tax to workers in the form of lower wages. Okay, so this is the argument that they're making, okay? If anything, this is an argument against the capitalist system, because the situation you're describing here is that the federal government is saying that billion-dollar corporations, okay, we're not talking about small businesses here, we're talking about billion-dollar, extremely hyper-profitable corporations. And the federal government is saying you now have to pay a minimum of 15% in your corporate tax rate. Now, keep in mind, again, I'll repeat myself, the current standard says that they're supposed to be paying 21%, but because we have all of these loopholes and exemptions and shit like that, they don't end up paying that as an effective tax rate. So you're not even raising taxes on them, and these corporations are apparently, according to Republicans, going to turn around and force the consequences on their workforce for that increase in taxes that they are going to be paying as a result of that 15% minimum tax. And they're basically just saying, well, they're just going to pass that on to workers in the form of cuts to wages or benefits or working conditions, etc., which is, again, an argument against a hierarchical authoritarian structure that we have with the capitalist system, where workers are always going to be the ones who get shafted whenever we try to apply even just a tiny modicum of regulations or taxes on some of the wealthiest entities in the world. I mean, it's just a completely fucking ridiculous argument to be making. If anything, this is an argument to go say, maybe we should, allow workers at these companies to be unionized, to have some sort of a protection against companies just deciding to unilaterally lower their wages so that they can continue spending tens of billions of dollars a year on fucking stock buybacks to enrich their wealthy shareholders and their executives and CEOs. I mean, completely stupid argument there that's being laid out by Republicans. But they continue here with another quote about his position on climate change. They say, Walker, in particular, has targeted climate change-related policies and spending, at times speaking confusingly about the issue. He said, "Since we don't control the air, our good air decided to float over to China's bad air, and so when China gets our good air, their bad air got to move, so it moves over to our good airspace, and then now we got to clean that back up." I mean, I don't even know what you want to say, man. Yes, air does in fact move throughout the world. It's not static. It doesn't stay over one particular area, but are you trying to use that to say that we shouldn't be addressing climate change because maybe China's not making equal investments into climate change and that their pollution is still going to have a negative effect on the global air quality or something like that? That's not an argument against addressing climate change. That's just an argument for more aggressively tackling climate change. And if you think that China is not, carrying their weight in terms of shifting away from fossil fuel usage and towards renewable energies, well, that's a great opportunity, right? For somebody who, as Herschel Walker and the rest of the Republican Party like to portray themselves as like, super hawkish when it comes to China and wanting to outcompete China on the global market. Well, you got a fucking opportunity here to actually control the future of renewable energy, which is inevitably going to be the future, regardless of how long you want to hang on to fossil fuels. You're absolutely delusional if you think that that is going to be a sustainable long-term project. We have to shift to renewable energy. And so if your argument here is that China's not doing enough, well, then we should do more. We should take over this market. We should be the global leader in investing in renewable energy and, be a, something for the entire world to be envying right now. But he's making the complete opposite argument there. And it just makes absolutely no sense, both in the way that he's wording it and also just at a fundamental level, the argument that he's making that's underlying that. But just a little bit more information on this guy in terms of how absolutely insane it is that this election is even remotely close. Hopefully this debate that's coming up is going to, nudge it in a better direction. But just a little bit more information. I've covered this in previous videos before, but it's always, kind of entertaining to go back through this because this shit is just absolutely wild. They say here from Mother Jones, Abigail Weinberg, Herschel Walker, star running back who claims a bumper sticker stopped him from shooting someone, wins the Georgia primary. So what are they talking about here? They say Herschel Walker, a former star running back whose actual policy stances are ill-defined to non-existent, has secured the primary nomination for the Republican senator in Georgia. And they say that Walker is a divisive figure even among conservatives. While former President Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham encouraged him to run for office, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell was once so concerned with Walker's candidacy for good reason. I mean, we're seeing that play out now, one of the weakest candidates in the entire Republican Senate project. But they say that he was so concerned with his candidacy that he suggested that ousted Republican senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue look into running against him. So Mitch McConnell thought that this guy was going to be such a bad candidate, which he was kind of right about, that he was willing to go appeal to Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue to run against him in the primary, okay? Two people who were widely known, and this is part of the reason, or one of the main reasons they ended up losing to Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, widely known to be two of the most corrupt motherfuckers, not just within the Republican Party, but within the entire country with the stock trades that they were making during the pandemic. I mean, these two people are, widely despised, I think, in Georgia, especially Kelly Loeffler now. And the idea that you would think they would be superior candidates, I mean, maybe, but at the same time, you're kind of grasping at straws and demonstrating that, at least in the state of Georgia, Republicans don't even have a semi-half decent candidate to be putting up against these people. But now we get into a little bit more details in terms of some of these wild stories that he's had through his past. They say that 3 women have accused Walker of threatening behavior, including against his ex-wife, who said that he repeatedly pointed a gun to her head. And Walker said that he had a dissociative identity disorder. Nobody should be critical of the fact that this guy's gone through mental troubles. That happens to millions of people across the country. Nothing against you for that. But at the same time, if you have a very violent history of pointing guns at people's heads and almost killing people, then, maybe you shouldn't be running for Senate. I mean, those two things can be true at the same time. But they said that he even wrote a book about it and claims that blackouts from the disorder have prevented him from recalling incidents when he may have acted violently. They say that still Walker has admitted to his share of erratic behavior. He used to have a habit of playing Russian roulette, which he considered the ultimate game of competition. What? How is Russian roulette even a game of competition? It's just pure luck, right? That's the whole point of the game of Russian roulette, is that you're just spinning the chamber and you don't know what's going to be in it. There's no competition involved in that. So that in and of itself is just kind of a bizarre way to portray that. But he said that to Howard Stern, apparently, saying, "I love competition so much." And at the beginning of his memoir that he wrote, he recounts an incident where he drove across town intending to shoot someone who had inconvenienced him, thinking about, quote, "the visceral enjoyment that I would get from seeing the small entry wound and the spray of brain tissue and blood like a 4th of July firework exploding behind him." That is a quote from Herschel Walker, okay? But it gets even better. He said, "A smile Jesus loves you bumper sticker is what caused him to change his mind and not go blast this guy's head off." I mean, come on. This is the person that we're talking about here. And we're dealing with polling data like this. I mean, here from 538, they say apparently it's now Herschel Walker is, slightly closing the gap. They say that Warnock is up 47.2% to 45.1%. In my opinion, that's basically a wash. I mean, I think for Warnock to be confident in this or safe in this seat, he would probably need to have a 6-point advantage or something like that. So, I mean, in all likelihood, if I had to, pick who's going to end up winning this election, right now I would probably say that Herschel Walker has the advantage, which is an absolutely terrifying thing. I mean, it's not even just terrifying. It's just it gets gets into the fundamental like pathetic nature of U.S. politics right now, where candidate quality to some sense it does matter, right? Because I think that's why Herschel Walker is somewhat struggling to get a lead in this primary. In a state like Georgia, he should be able to, or Republicans generally should be able to, reliably take back that seat in a midterm where you have inflation and the economy is leaning in like their favor in terms of where people are standing with two political parties and addressing that. So you would think that like generically they would have a great opportunity here. So to some extent, like the fact that he's still down in the polling does show that candidate quality matters. But on the other side of that, this guy is pretty much on track to win right now. I mean, at least it's going to be a very, very close marginal election, regardless of which way it goes. And again, I mean, that's just the pathetic nature of U.S. politics right now, where it's like, it doesn't even matter that you have a guy who is just openly admitting that he's going to get blasted on the debate stage because he's just like too dumb to be able to handle that. And also coming out, performing completely incoherent sentences, can't come up with an actual coherent policy agenda, and has an extremely violent violent history with some of his family members, and planning to go shoot people arbitrarily and then deciding not to because he saw a Jesus bumper sticker or whatever the fuck. I mean, this is who we're talking about here, and we're still dealing with an election that could be a fucking coin toss. I mean, what is this country at this point where, even somebody like Raphael Warnock, who I don't agree with on everything, I think he's, better than a lot of the corporate Democrats that we currently have in the Senate, but I mean, he's not terrible. I mean, this is a guy who, compared to Herschel Walker, should be leagues ahead of him, should be miles ahead of him. But, I think that Herschel Walker is at least running a slightly better campaign than the type of campaign we've seen from somebody like Dr. Oz, who's another horrible Republican Senate candidate right now. I've been seeing a lot of his ads here in the state of Georgia. They do seem to be focused mostly on like inflation and jobs and the economy and bashing Joe Biden and trying to tie Herschel Walker to Joe Biden, which is better than what we've seen from Dr. Oz, who's basically just trying to go out there and tie John Fetterman to the most popular senator in the history of this country with Bernie Sanders for like 10 years running now. So I definitely think he's running a slightly better campaign. Maybe that explains a little bit of this, but I mean, at the end of the day, it just still is absolutely blowing my mind that even though we are talking about a state like Georgia, which has always historically been very conservative and right-leaning, that this election is even close, because these two people are not even remotely comparable, and clearly Herschel Walker knows that even he has to admit that he has some pretty major flaws that could lead to his downfall. And I'm looking forward to seeing the debate that's going to be taking place next month. I think they said like roughly mid-October it's going to be, so that should be pretty entertaining, and I'll definitely be covering that on this channel.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying